Hey friend, I wrote an article about 12 pieces of advice that I wish I knew as a junior software engineer or junior software developer. So I thought I'd just expand on that and go through each of these pieces of advice and tips. It is quite a lot to go through, so I thought I'd break it up into two parts, this being part one. I will link the article in the description below if you want to check that out as well. Starting your career in tech and as a junior software engineer can be quite daunting, especially with the way things are moving. Tech is always ever changing, always improving, always something new out there. So there's always some new framework, some new programming language out there that you think that you should be learning, and it can become overwhelming. You may not be sure where to start. You may try to cram and learn every programming language that you possibly can before you get any job interviews. So let's try to not worry about all of that. And I'll go through some of these tips and things that I have learned over the years through my own experience that I really thought that would really be helpful for me to know if I was a junior. A lot of these tips I've come across through other senior devs or just through sheer experience and trial and error over time. When I wrote the article, it made me really reflect and think a lot about all these various tips. I remember getting my first junior role, and it was quite an experience just starting out, not knowing a lot. I really jumped in the deep end where I really had to learn a lot of stuff very quickly because it was really a fast-paced environment and there was a lot to learn and there was a lot at stake at the time. So I won't go into too much detail with that, but that you can read in the article. Let's get into the various tips and the pieces of advice that will hopefully help you as well if you're a junior dev, or even if you're really, I think all these pieces can actually be applied to whatever level, whether you're a senior, really advanced, or even an intermediate, or a junior starting out. I think definitely there are aspects of these various pieces of advice that we may tend to forget. So it's kind of good to be reminded of these things every now and again, and it's good to reflect and think about them. And it increases your awareness on these things, and ultimately by being aware and conscious of these various things can help you in your day-to-day and in your developer career and your developer path. So let's check them out. I think when I started, and even starting at a new company, it's natural to feel very intimidated, feel very overwhelmed, especially if you're in a company that's a lot of really good people and you speak to a lot of these people and they seem to know what they're talking about, and you're still starting, so you're not so sure exactly what you're doing. You ultimately compare yourself to them and you may feel a bit inferior, or it's very easy to doubt your ability, which I found myself doing many times. So it's important to understand and remember that with time, with experience, you will develop more confidence, more trust in yourself, and it's important to reflect on that and reflect on how far you've come, how far your journey is at the moment, where you are, what you've done. All these things, really, it's good to sometimes just stop and think and reflect on these things. So with that being said, the first piece of advice is to stop worrying that you're not good enough. As I said, sometimes we worry that we're not good enough, get intimidated by seeing the things that other people are doing, hearing how they speak and what they speak about. It's important to understand that you're in this position because you've come so far. If you have a position in the company, you've been through the interview process, they feel that you are adequate and they feel that they have confidence in your abilities. So it's important to reflect on the realization that you've made it this far. You've been through the interview process. You've done everything that needed to be done to get you to be in this position. You have the confidence of the people who interviewed you, who gave you the job. So take solace in that and take comfort in knowing that you are where you're meant to be, and that you do have the skills, and you've proved it with your track record or whatever you've done up until this point to get to where you are. Now, with that being said, it's important to realize that even though you may be a junior, for example, that you shouldn't just expect everything to be spoon-fed to you. Be willing to ask questions, be willing to be inquisitive and curious and to explore things and find things out for yourself before turning to other people for questions and for the answers. So by having this sort of mindset and by doing these sort of things, it'll really accelerate your learning and your growth, and in turn your career and your path will definitely be accelerated just by that. And your knowledge, you will gain so much knowledge in a lot shorter time than if you just sit around waiting to expect things. You will likely not progress as much. Tip number 2, quite a sort of cliche one, but never stop learning. I think this applies to really any discipline or any sort of industry, but when it comes to tech and software development, programming, like I said in the beginning, tech is always changing. Programming languages are popping up all over the place. Frameworks are popping up all over the place. So it's important to never stop learning. Existing languages are always updated. It's critical to kind of be at the forefront of these sort of things. Obviously, you cannot, know everything, and you cannot really be learning every single thing that pops up. But within your domain or whatever you currently be using, I think it's important to make some sort of effort to continuously upskill, continuously learn. This will help to keep you ahead and help to keep you ever evolving and relevant in the world that is tech. So something I used to do, for example, was I used to make sure that I got into the office at least half an hour earlier, and I used to just learn something, read something, or even go through the existing code base that I was busy with at the time, just to help get to better grips of things, to understand things better, to increase my knowledge. And this really paid off just in 1 year. You can imagine how many extra hours by just doing that every day really added up and counted towards. The point that I'm trying to get across is not to worry about having to learn the specific things or whatever this is. The goal is to have that learning mindset and to keep that learning mindset throughout. That learning and that growth mindset, that's the key, and that's the big takeaway here. Tip number 3, something that I think we all suffer from, regardless of level, regardless of job. I think it happens to every single person out there, and oftentimes we think that we are the only one who feels like this, but you'll find that a lot of people tend to feel like this. That is imposter syndrome. So the tip is really to read, learn more about this concept, understand it, so that you're not sort of overwhelmed when it kind of happens to you. So yeah, I'm not going to go into a big explanation on what it is. Essentially, it's thinking again that you're not really good enough, you're not suitable to get things done or do certain things that you've been tasked to do, for example. In a sense, it's kind of similar to the tip number 1. And again, the advice I give is to try to reflect on the things that you've done, the path that you've taken to get to this point, and the various things or various tasks that you've done before. You may have thought that you were not capable to do, and at the end of it, you actually managed to do it, you got through it, it wasn't so bad. Reflecting on all of these things will help give you that confidence and that motivation to understand that you are perfectly fine and you are perfectly capable to get these things done. It's fine to feel intimidated, it's fine to feel like it's a challenge, and that's a good thing, that's a good feeling to have. It means that you're being challenged, you are embracing growth, and you're embracing that learning mindset. So it's a really good thing to feel, even though it may not feel all that good. Also, something that I found is that I tend to find reassurance in my abilities when giving advice or mentoring other devs as well, because then you sort of see that you are indeed capable and that you do have the knowledge that's required. Try to speak to people, offer guidance if you can, offer help, try to help people, and all these things will really help you internally and implicitly deal with the imposter syndrome. Alright, tip number 4 is to seek out mentors and pick their brains. You'll find that a lot of senior devs, or I think devs in general, like to share knowledge where they can. Or I guess most nice people like to share their knowledge. If you can find really any dev that has some sort of knowledge, it's good to interact with. Naturally, the more experienced one has more advice and tips that they can possibly give. But I mean, this is a bit subjective, so try to work with and speak to other people and other developers who are senior to you or who are a lot more knowledgeable than you. And this helps learning a lot. You can really learn a lot from them just by observing the way they do things, solution problems, the way they get to certain solutions. I learned a lot just by watching other developers who were miles ahead in terms of experience than me. I picked up a lot on their habits and the way they do things. A simple example is kind of debugging a problem, which can become daunting depending on how big the problem is. So if you see how someone reasons and how someone breaks down the logic in order to solve the problem or in order to debug the problem, it's quite a good and insightful way to form good habits, to understand how to get to the root of a problem, which is what a large portion of a software engineer's job is at times. A bit away from the topic there, but ultimately try to get one sort of good mentor that you can, constantly interact with, constantly ask questions. As always, try to solve the problem yourself first, but when you're really stuck, at least you have that someone who you can consult with, who you can speak to. Remember to be respectful of their time as well, so don't bombard them, but make sure to be appreciative of their time and their knowledge that they're sharing with you. So tip number 5 is to watch YouTube videos or do online courses somewhat casually. So what I mean by that is, we can get overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information out there. If you're trying to watch long detailed videos on some specific programming paradigm or algorithm or whatever the case is, or doing a Pluralsight course every day, it can become very overwhelming, can sort of burn out by that. Doing all of that plus trying to do your day job, it's a lot to take in and it's a lot to deal with mentally as well, which you can become mentally exhausted just by doing that. So watch shorter YouTube clips. There's a lot of guys who do some nice short YouTube clips where you don't really have to focus too deeply. It gives you a general idea on how to think. The principle here is to be able to watch these sort of short, small videos regularly and not to watch them deeply in order to, really focus on what they're doing, but it'll help the way you think. That's the key, is just to keep that sort of problem solving, that sort of logic-based approach, that at the forefront of your brain. Don't try to go too deep, but try to be consistent, regular watching these sort of content when you can. I hope that makes sense. And what's also good is to watch YouTube videos on people explaining concepts which may seem really trivial and simple to you. Maybe the basic computer science concepts. Really good to rewatch and remind ourselves of these things. In turn, it makes our understanding of these basics and these concepts a lot deeper, which ultimately will benefit us to no end. It's really good to rewatch these sort of things, and it's also good that there's various people you can watch, so you can get things at different perspectives, which is always good. It's a really insightful way to learn existing things in different ways. So tip number 6, the last tip for today, is to reread Clean Code by Uncle Bob. I'm sure you know who that is, and I'm sure you've heard of the book. I sure hope you have. So it's a really good book. There's a lot of good takeaways from it, and I think we all, no matter the level, I think we all need to be reminded of these concepts every now and again. So it's definitely worth rereading or re-looking at certain aspects of it every couple of months or at least once a year. This also helps in the way you approach general coding, or looking at code definitely shapes the way you think, which is really ultimately what you want to do. So one of the key aspects of the book is to look at pieces of code that you've written and ask yourself, how can you refactor this, or how can you rewrite this and make it better and cleaner and more readable? Practicing this helped me tremendously as a junior in identifying gaps when analyzing other people's code, as well as writing my own code for things and speeding up my coding workflow. So thanks for watching. In those 6 tips, there's quite a bit of detail in there. I hope it all makes sense. If anything doesn't make sense, or if you have any questions on anything, please do leave a comment below. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's valuable. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll go to part 2 and look at the next 6 tips.